My name is Marilyn Abear, and I am the hearing officer for the Sustainable Land Development Code. And today's hearing, there are two cases on the agenda, and I would just ask staff if there are any changes, any amendments, deletions from the agenda.
Here in Officer Abear, there are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you. First matter will be case number 245270, Bob Sherwin variance.
Thank you, Madam Abear. Christina Ortiz, Building Development Review Specialist. Robert Sherwin, applicant, requests approval of an accessory dwelling unit standards variance to allow a two-story ADU on a 2.5 acre parcel. Currently, the applicant has an existing guest home with a loft. The subject property lies within the residential estate zoning district, where the base density is one dwelling per 2.5 acres. The property is located at 28 Estrellas de Tano within Township 17 North, Range 9 East, Section 4. Summary: the applicant requests a variance of Chapter 8, Table 8-9, Dimensional Standards, Residential Estate to allow two primary residents on a parcel of land consisting of 2.5 more or less acres. The subject property lies within the residential estate zoning district, which allows for one dwelling per 2.5 acres. The applicant states that he bought the property as is with the two-story ADU on the property in 2016. There are three permits that have been pulled for this property. Permit 20-4040 is for a low-impact home occupation. Permit 20-539 is for a storage addition to the garage, and 94-987 is for an addition remodel. Permit 94-987 was not able to be located with the IPRA request for the file. And 20-539 references the ADU as a studio on the plat and guest house on the labeling provided on the site plan. The accessory dwelling unit is 2 stories measuring at 19 feet 6 inches, exceeding the height that would allow it to qualify as an accessory dwelling unit, and is on an individual septic system that is not registered and does not have a leach field, which is contrary to the SLDC standards for an accessory dwelling unit as defined by the SLDC. The applicant has addressed the variance criteria, and staff has responded to the applicant's comments as contained in the memo. As of Monday, February 10th, 2025, staff received one letter of opposition. Staff has passed out this letter to be made part of the record. Building and Development Services staff has reviewed this request for compliance with pertinent SLDC requirements and has found that the facts presented do not support the request for a variance. Staff recommends denial of the request of a variance to allow 2 dwelling units on the 2.5 acre parcel. If the hearing officer finds the variance criteria has been met and recommends approval of the variance, staff recommends the following conditions to be imposed. Madam Abear, may I enter the conditions into the record?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I stand for any questions.
Ms. Ortiz, I just have a few things I'd like to get clarification on. In your report on the first page, it describes this as being an ADU on 2.5 acre parcel. And when I look at Exhibit A, which is the letter of intent, on that, on the first page, the second line, the applicant states that we purchased the 5-acre property. Was that 5-acre property then divided into 2.5 acres?
Yes, it was divided.
Okay, and you testified that this is in District 1, and again, on Exhibit A on the second page, it describes this as being, if we look at the second page of Exhibit 1 is the land development planning letter of November 4th. And the very end of the first paragraph describes it as the subject property is located within District 2. So they may have mistaken that. Is it your understanding that this is in District 1?
Be able to verify that, Dom?
It's in the Tano Road area.
Hearing Officer Aber, I'm going to verify that right now, but I do believe it is in the District 1, but I'm going to verify that right now.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Ortiz, going to the last page of the staff report on page 5. Do you have that? The very first line refers to it as the use may impact adjacent land uses. Residential fringe zoning allows for 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. This is actually in residential estate zoning, is that correct?
Correct, that's a typo.
So that, okay.
Hearing Officer Aber, and I did verify it is within District 1.
Okay, thank you. And on the staff recommendation, the first sentence, staff recommends denial of the request for a variance to allow 2 dwelling units on the 6.54 acre parcel, but that should be 2.5.
Correct.
Is that also correct?
Correct, Officer Aber.
And that's repeated down in the number 2 of the conditions. So I'll just correct that as well, 2.5.
Yes, please.
Ms. Ortiz, I saw something in I can't put my hands on it, but it appears that this property was improved as early as 1990. I think there was one of the map, maybe the plats that indicated and showed 2 dwellings, on this property. Okay, I'm looking at something called the J.M. Walsh lot split in 1990. And I believe we're talking about the track 3. That's the last page of Exhibit B. Oh, I'm sorry, no. It's the last page of Exhibit C. The general warranty deed is the cover page, and there are 3 pages to it.
Can you repeat your question?
If you look at page 3 of Exhibit C,
Yes.
It's titled The J.M. Walsh Lot Split. And it's dated 1990. If you look over on the upper right corner, the signatures with the dates, those are 1990.
Correct.
And is it track 3, the subject property?
Yes.
And clearly, there's one residence, and above that, to the north of that, appears to be another structure. Is that the ADU?
That's the structure in question. On the plat, it shows it as a studio, and studios are not accessory dwelling units.
So at that time, staff belief is that it was a studio in 1990,
Correct.
and that it sometime later became modified.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And I think I missed it, but you were explaining the permits. And was there a permit that identified the construction or the conversion of the studio to an ADU?
So there's one permit from 94-987 that we weren't able to locate through an IPRA request. That was for an addition remodel.
So that wouldn't have been the conversion.
Without being able to pull that permit, we're not sure if it was done on the main home or if it was for the studio.
And I think what I'm curious is, what was the zoning for that area? This was, if it was done before 2016, it would have been prior to the current code. And I don't know what the zoning would have been in that area.
No.
Hearing Officer Hebert, I'm not aware of what the zoning previously was, but if the permit was for the remodel or the conversion of a studio into an ADU, it would have been in compliance back then, and we would see it, grandfathered in as in now. Since there was no permit found on that conversion, we have to go by current code, current SLDC 2016-9, which, does regulate ADUs.
So because there wasn't a permit that was found in the records, it wouldn't come in as a grandfathered conversion or an ADU that would comply?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ortiz. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
And I did have one more question.
Sure.
Is the letter that I was just delivered from the homeowners association, is that the only comment that staff has received on this request?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is the applicant here to speak on behalf of the request?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Danny Martinez. I represent Mr. Sherman. I do. My name is Danny Martinez. My address is 7009 Maryland Avenue, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87109. Madam Hubert, this is an issue that when it first came up, we had to really do some deep researching, and I think that you've touched on a couple of points. If I can kind of go back on the history, the original lot split or split for this property was done in 1988. I've provided the staff with that survey also. The septic tank permit was also issued in 1988, so that just leads me to believe that the building permit for the house and the guest house were permitted at the same time. In my efforts, I also searched for permits, and I went before the county and searched through the county's records. I also went through the construction industry's records. There's no records because those records are only kept for a period of time before they're discharged. So there's no permits that were actually available. The issue for me was nothing more than how do I go about proving this? Well, I think that survey from 1991 is pretty evident that the guest house and the main house were built at the same time that the septic tank permit was issued. And so based on that, I felt that this was enough evidence to show that this wasn't something that was built any later than that or any earlier than that or later than that. It was actually built within that time frame of 88 to 91. And again, make the assumption that the septic tank permit was needed in order to get a building permit. So I'm going to use 1988 as to when these structures were either started or they were built up. The 91 survey shows those improvements, so that tells me that they were already in place. The issues that we had was the guest house or the ADU was basically built to match the existing structure, which is a high steeple type building. It's got a real steep pitch on them. And it just tells me that when they built this, that it was basically done under the same permit. Again, we won't be able to prove that.
Could I interrupt for just a minute,
Sure.
Mr. Martinez? The staff report indicated on the second page that the accessory dwelling unit is on its own individual septic system. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's correct. And we do have a septic tank permit that was signed off and approved by New Mexico Environmental Department. So we do have a second septic tank for that unit.
But is your understanding that the Environment Department approved that back in 1990 when you're saying that this was built as a structure,
Yeah,
a habitable structure?
Yes, there's a note on that 1991 or 88 permit that was written that said the septic tank for the guest house was in place and inspected. However, we weren't able to inspect the leach fields. So that was actually attached on the original septic tank permit for the main house and the guest house. So that just leads me to believe that when they inspected the main house, they also inspected the guest house, but for whatever reason, they couldn't inspect the leach fields, and that's where that note came in. Now, if I go back to the septic tank permit for the guest house, it states that there was an inspection of the tank and the leach field, so it was inspected, and NMED has acknowledged that with me.
And what year was that?
It was acknowledged in 2016, and the reason they had to do that is there was some issues with the septic tank, so they had to hire, well, when Mr. Sherman bought the property in 2016, part of the home inspection was included the septic tank. So they had to bring in AAA Septic Service to come in, inspect the tank, check the leach fields, and issue their amended septic tank permits. So the permit for that guest house was actually reissued again in 2016. So again, there's two conclusions. The note on the 2018 permit that states that they inspected the tank, but they didn't inspect the leach fields. So in 2016, they came back in and they acknowledged that there was an inspection, and that's why they approved it again.
And you're saying that the systems are not separate?
No,
That's
they're-
all one system?
No, they're two separate systems. The main house has its own, and the guest house has its own also.
But the existence of that separate one for the guest house goes back prior to 2016, is that correct?
Well, the permit that I got from the state says 2016, but again, I got to just go back to that 1998 or 1988 on the note that says that they inspected the guest house tank, but they didn't do the leach fields. That's really the one thing that I can hang my hat on that one.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
And again, the note is very clear on the main house septic permit, so that it references the guest house is what it does.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Martinez. Go on, I'm sorry I interrupted.
Yeah. So again, in going back on the history, Because these lots were created pre-code of the old development code, there were limitations, and the limitation was minimum lot size of 2.5 acres. Well, that's basically where this came in. That's why the subdivision plat was approved in 2018, because there was a minimum lot size of 2.5 acres. So as we progress further, in 1998, there was a change of the code again, and at that point, the change of the code basically came back that said minimum lot size is now being revised back to 2.5 acres. And it's really difficult because in one motion, you see that it was 5 acres, and then all of a sudden it was back to 2.5 acres. While when they did the 1998 change, they made it 5 acres. But these lots were already legal lots of record. We weren't creating anything. The 1991 survey, all it did is it came in, it adjusted lot lines, still maintained the 3 lots, and so that's what that survey did. So again, the legal lots of record were already placed. The 1998 change that was changing it to 5 acres didn't make this property have to come into compliance because the lots were already legal. So again, now we get into when Mr. Sherman bought the property. Mr. Sherman bought the property in 2016. He had to go through a full home inspection just like anybody would when you're buying a home. And again, the issue of the septic tank came up at that point. That's why they had to get NMED involved in it again. They exposed the septic tank. They did everything they had to do. NMED came in and inspected it, and they signed off on both the tank and the leach field in 2016. So in the records of the environmental department, they couldn't find anything that says otherwise, but it was just for the purpose of the home inspection that we had to get that tank. They had to get that tank re-inspected. So Mr. Sherman and his wife basically bought the property in 2016. They utilized the guest house as a rental, and again at that point there wasn't really a short-term or long-term rental that was under the code. Hell, it didn't happen until the new SLDC came in that we started seeing the short-term, long-term rental section of the codes come in place. So what they did is they just went ahead and they used it as a short-term rental. They've used it since, like I say, 2016 that they bought it all. The issues with the short-term rental or the guest house is it's got a loft, and in the loft again, this is built back in 1988. It is what it was. It was existing. The loft was always, it's got a 1-bedroom on the bottom, and it's got the loft, which basically is open to the rest of the lower level. The height of the building was already in place. So all these items were already in place. So it wasn't something that was created. So when they used it as a short-term rental, they opened up a business, Santa Fe Wellness Retreat Center, in 2022. That, again, I'm going to have to go 2022, 2023, that they utilized the short-term rental to accommodate patients. And I'm not going to use the word patients because this isn't a medical facility. This is a wellness center. It's a spa is basically what it is, where people would come in, they would rent the short-term rental, and they would spend 2 or 3 days over there while they're going through their treatment. A lot of the treatments were for people that were dealing with PTSD, major structural problems with their bodies. So that's really the intent of this spa, was just to give these people an opportunity to have someplace to stay. And so that's been the success of the spa, is that it allows that short-term rental for people that are in need. Since that point, basically the treatment center has on average of maybe 5 patients a week. Sometimes there's not even any patients. Like this winter, it was a very slow season for them. They still have that ability to rent the guest house out as a short-term rental to people that are visiting out of state or wherever they're coming from. So that's basically what they've been doing, is they've been renting it for both the use of the spa and again for visitors coming into Santa Fe. At this point, like I say, we have concluded that if it takes us to go ahead and file construction permit with the county and through the state to go ahead and bring this guest house into compliance with the fact that there were no permits to be found. Mr. Sherman is willing to have me go ahead and do that. We're hoping to get this submitted to the county within the next month. And so what we're doing is we're just kind of repeating the process that started from 1988 and just agreeing to go ahead and submit building permit application for that guest house to satisfy the concerns of the county. And again, under the SLDC, there are a lot of restrictions that came with it. And again, I think what's unfortunate about that is things that were grandfathered in, basically should have had that opportunity to function as a grandfathering project. Well, again, the code doesn't really acknowledge grandfathering. So again, that's why we've decided, well, whatever it takes, we'll just make the application, we'll come into compliance, and we're hoping that that'll satisfy the needs for building permit.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Is that all?
Yes.
We have? All right. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this application? Yes, please come forward.
Hearing officer, the applicant, Robert Sherwin, is indicated he would like to speak online also.
Oh, all right. I think
I'm going to get him.
I'm sorry, are you speaking on behalf of the application?
No.
Or in opposition? Well, let's hear what the applicant has to say first. Thank you.
Mr. Sherwin, if you could unmute yourself and be sworn in.
Sherwin, are you there? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth?
Yes.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Robert and Denise Sherwin, 30 Australia Statano, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87506.
Mr. Sherwin, please go forward with your testimony.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, and I think Mr. Martinez did a good job in describing our situation. But I wanted to say that the home was the very first home to be built in this area. I spoke to a lady who's been out there the longest, and she said that in the 1988, 1989, it was the only property there. It was on private property. It's not part of an HOA. That the other homes out there, with the exception of a 5-member, I believe it's a condominium structure, has the only HOA. And this is the gentleman that is in opposition there. We are not part of that HOA. None of the other homes surrounding it are part of that HOA. It's just the 5 members of the Fisher Replat Homeowners Association. Our home is on a corner, so you come in, and when you hit Australia's Daytona, we are the very first driveway that you access off of Australia's Daytona. Beyond that road is where the 5-member condo association is located. As Mr. Martinez mentioned, the home occupation license that we have for the Santa Fe Wellness Retreat, my wife had the Light Vessel in town and the Love Yourself Cafe that was a wellness facility that was shut down during COVID. And so this was what we moved some of that equipment onto the property to treat just the people that really need help. And we have 1 employee that works 3 days a week, and we may not even get 5 people in a week, and many weeks we don't have any people. Whatever people, even the short-term rental that for the guest house, turn in that first driveway on Australia's Daytona, and there is no traffic that would ever even make it to anybody beyond us. So the idea of traffic and noise and so forth is just not based in facts. We have never had a complaint in 8 years. And if this was an issue to the people, why didn't they ever bring it to our attention? Nobody has ever come forward. And so, you know, we're trying to do something that is beneficial to people. This is not a meth lab or something that, you know, we want to be good neighbors. And as Mr. Martinez stated, we bought a home that with help with title insurance, and we did all the inspections. And to our knowledge, when we bought the property 8 years ago, everything was in compliance, and it was the county changing the rules 8 years later that said you couldn't have a additional dwelling unit. 10 years after this home, the guest house and / studio had already been built, and then later created the rules for short-term rental, and that's when the loft was no longer, you know, permitted. But again, these had been going on for 24 years. So we're just asking to be grandfathered in and to be able to continue our business and our residents and be good neighbors and run a quiet operation. So that's really all I want to say, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a voice here.
Mr. Sherman, I ran across a couple of different times, once in the Technical Advisory Committee report, they keep referring to a 5-acre property. Do you own the adjoining 2.5 acres of this property?
We do. It's two separate 2.5 acre lots, but we do own the adjoining property.
Oh, okay. So I suppose that's why the 5 acres shows up from time to time on these documents. But both the ADU under consideration and your residence is on that one property. That's correct?
Yeah, they're both on the 2.5 acre lot. Our daughter someday will own the other lot, but we own it now. So.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Does staff have any questions for Mr. Sherwin? No.
Hearing Officer Hebert, staff has no questions for Mr. Sherwin.
All right. Thank you. And with
Thank you.
Would you come forward again? I'm sorry, didn't get your name.
Brian Graves. I live at 3 Tierra de Tano, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87506. We are part of the Fisher's plat, homeowners plat, replat. And we've had our property there since 1995. I wanted to state that the Sherwins have never contacted us as neighbors, and we're just right across the street from them. From the day they bought the property until I got a notice from them maybe a month or two ago to come by and look at their property, and they had a issue with a second story in this unit that they were using as a bed and breakfast. And they've been using that bed and breakfast for a period of several years. And I noticed, you know, Mr. Sherwin said that it's primary use for clients of their wellness center. Well, if you look at the Airbnb site for that particular piece of property and just the number of days that it's been reserved, it's like 120 days in the last 2 years. So as neighbors, we are having to deal with increased traffic because they don't know where they're going. And the signage, they come down our road, they pull in our driveway, they ask how do they get to the wellness center or to the Airbnb. So there is traffic issues in that regard. When I went up there and met with the Sherwins and they gave me a tour of this, the Airbnb unit, and they said this is the second floor that they're questioning at the county. That is the only thing they said to me, just that issue. Not that it never was to be used as that particular kind of facility. So, you know, we had a long talk about some other thing, noise issues. You know, they have a hot tub and a swimming pool and a fire pit and a barbecue pit, and we're dealing with noise all the time from their guests, especially on the weekends. And, you know, we didn't buy our property out there back in 1995, and, you know, Lee's here, he had his property before us, to be in the middle of a business area. We did not do that. It's, you know, the county states that we're supposed to have a environmental issue, a quiet issue, no traffic issue. I think it's just a quiet residential area. But he has made it into a business, not just with the wellness center, but now with this Airbnb that they're doing, and it is rented numerous times. Y'all can check yourself. But we were never notified originally when they decided to make this guest house an Airbnb unit. I don't know what the requirements were at the time. I think the short-term rental agreement said you're supposed to notify your neighbors. So when they did this back in, 2016 or something like that, we were never notified. All of a sudden, we have people driving in, and we could hear, you know, music playing, and, you know, people have partying and that sort of thing. And it was just done, in our opinion, after the fact. Nobody notified us. We're concerned a little bit about, you know, a unit that was built that's being used as a short-term rental, Airbnb unit or whatever, not being up to code and creating, you know, like the septic tank issue. They say they fixed that, but, you know, it drains there. They sit up above us, and it drains our direction. And anything that would drain into our front of our houses. So, you know, that was a concern to us. You know, in granting, I'll just read this right here. When granting the variance, it's the hope of the current homeowners that the provisions must promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. You know, the applicant has the burden to present no adverse side effects in the neighborhood. And like I say, we've had our property since 1995, and we did not expect to have a business across the street from us. You know, we currently respectfully request that the variance regarding the short-term rental and in its two-story form be rejected.
Thank you, Mr. Graves.
Thank you.
Are there any other people who want to comment? Yes, please come forward.
Yes, I do. Lee Balick, 1 Tierra de Tano, Santa Fe. Just to respond to Mr. Sherwin's statements, he does not live at 30 Estrellas de Tano. He lives somewhere else. He doesn't live on that property. It's not his primary residence. And as to being the only building out there, my house was built in 1986. I don't have the proof with me, but that's it. My house predates his, I believe. So that's all.
Thank you. Are you saying that both of the residences on this property owned by Mr. Sherwin are rented out if he doesn't live on the property, or is one of the entities?
One is used as the spa and the other is used as the Airbnb.
I see. Thank you.
So it's not a residential property at all.
I see.
Oh, God.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, could you answer that question for us of whether or not Mr. Sherwin resides on the property?
And here and also,
I'm
Gary, just
still
let you know
here.
that Mr. Sherwin raised his hand again also to speak.
Well, all right, we'll let Mr. Sherwin, thank you. I don't have.
Yeah, we live at this house full-time since 2016. We do not own another property. I don't know where this gentleman's getting his information. We've never rented our main house, ever. We live there full-time. And so that's just erroneous. Brian, the first gentleman, said that we had rented the guest house 120 days in 2 years, 60 days in a year to two people that would be renting the place. So there's just my wife and I on the property. Most people have families of 4 and 5. That would be more people than this. So, and they turn off before they ever get to his road. We live in the main house right next to the guest house. We've never heard noise issues. That's erroneous. And so, and again, if it was a problem, why would he have not approached us sometime in the last 8 years? Never, ever have had a complaint. So I'm not sure what the agenda is here other than just trying to block this. But yeah, these comments are not based in fact.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sherwin. Is there?
Thank you.
He lists,
Mr. Bailiff?
on the application, he listed his address as a real estate company in Las Campanas. And he also owns a property I think it's in Las Campanas, very near it, on Estates Drive, where his wife, in the white pages, his wife lists that as her address.
Yeah, we lived in Las Campanas before we bought this property. We have not owned that property since 2010, actually.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwin. Yes, please come forward.
I do. Yes, I'm Terry Graves. I live at 3 Tierra de Tano, directly across the street in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'd just like to address Mr. Sherwin. Yes, we have brought up the issues with the noise, which he seems to think is not a problem for the neighborhood. I have brought it up to him, and one time I have said to him many times that we just are good neighbors. We try to accommodate those individuals who are visiting his wellness center and now his proposed short-term rental, which has been in existence for 2 years prior to being properly permitted. I mean, it's been in existence for longer than that, but the county has come in with a notification. Obviously, all of these code violations came because the Sherwins were operating not in code enforcement. So both not being regulated by the short-term rental people and now being caught at it. So we know very much as good neighbors that the Sherwins do things out of violation and in violation, and that then ask for forgiveness. And we in turn this time want to be proactive and make sure that the traffic on a non-maintained county road, he's not been honest. It has 2 entrances to this supposed wellness center, and one of those entrances is on the road that he says there's absolutely no traffic on. Just last week, he had 2 guests that were coming who parked in my driveway and stated they were lost. That happens on a regular basis, but as a good neighbor, I don't bring it to Mr. Sherwin's attention. If he'd like for me to, every single time that we get one of these violations, I'd be more than happy to in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Graves.
Thank you.
Is there any other comment from the audience? No. And does staff have any other comment they'd like to make on this?
Here in Xavier, there's nobody else indicating they wish to speak.
All right, thank you very much. With that, I'd like everyone to know I'll prepare a recommended order within 15 business days. Thank you for attending. The next case is case number 245250, James and Jeanette Wood variance.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Officer Hebert, Marie Martinez, Building and Development Review Specialist with the Growth Management Division. Case 24-5250, James and Jeanette Wood variance. James and Jeanette Wood applicants request a variance of Chapter 10, Section 10.4.2.3, Building and Site Design Standards of the SLDC regarding the secondary access. The site is within Township 15 North, Range 9 East, Section 13, within the El Dorado at Santa Fe. The property is located at 4 Gerardo Court. History. A complete application was submitted on Thursday, October 31st, 2024. The variance request came about when the applicant, James and Jeanette Wood, met with staff regarding a secondary access onto their property off 4 Gerardo Court. The applicant is the owner of the property as indicated by a warranty deed recorded in the records of the Santa Fe County Clerk on December 13th, 2023, as instrument 2025027. The 1.40 acre lot was created in 1974 by warranty deed recorded in the Santa Fe County Clerk's Office under Book 5, page 10. Summary. The applicants are requesting a variance for a secondary access to allow extended family members to park in front of the detached accessory dwelling structure. The applicant is requesting a variance of Chapter 10.4.2.3.3, Building and Site Designs, to allow a separate access onto his property. The proposed access to the site will be off 4 Gerardo Court. The applicant has addressed the variance criteria as detailed in the memo. Recommendation. Staff recommends denial of a variance of Chapter 10.4.2.3.3, Building and Site Design, to allow a separate access for the accessory dwelling. If the hearing officer finds that the application has met the variance criteria and recommends approval of the variance, staff recommends the following conditions be imposed. Hearing Officer Hebert, may I enter these conditions into the record?
Yes, please, and just for clarification, on page 5 of your report, it under recommendation, it recommends denial, and then it lists the 4, and those are the conditions. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Hebert.
And I could just ask you on number 3, the applicant must install an 18-inch culvert at the driveway entrance. Is that the drive, that's hard to describe. Is that the drive that doesn't go to the ADU, what had been converted to the ADU?
Yes, that one would be, Hearing Officer Hebert, that is the proposed site on the southeast side of the property.
Okay. Have you received any public comment on this application at all?
No, I have not.
And Ms. Martinez, do you know, I understand this is in El Dorado, and it's a 1.5 acre or 1 acre lot?
Yeah, yes.
So is it zoned residential community? Do you
It
know what the-
is, okay, this is. Hearing Officer Hebert, this is zoned residential estate.
But that would be a minimum 2.5 acres per dwelling. But I don't, that's what I was having confusion. How is that possible if this is on a 1 acre lot or a 1.5 acre lot?
Hearing Officer Hebert, so there was an existing residence on the property, The applicant came for an addition, which I believe was a garage, and I believe that there was a permit to convert it into an ADU. So it's an ADU, not a second residence on the property.
No, I do understand that, thank you, but I'm just trying to, I understand this is an El Dorado, but is that a zoned residential estate, even though a lot of the lots there are less than 2 acres?
Yes, residential estates is the correct zoning for that area. And that is the current zoning.
Hearing officer, for clarification, this subdivision was created prior to the SLDC and the 1996 ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lovato. Maybe I could ask you all this as well. Is there a requirement by the county standards that there only be one drive per residence, or is the issue here because it's part of the ADU requirements?
So there is an ordinance, or there is a requirement for multiple driveways not to be allowed, but that's for newer subdivisions.
Yes.
What this case here is the fact that it's an ADU, and an ADU is required to share the driveway with the primary residence.
All right, so that does answer, because when I looked up 7.11.12.2, it says lots within new residential subdivisions shall be limited to a single access. So El Dorado is certainly not a new subdivision.
That is correct.
All right, I'm sorry I interrupted you. But
No,
I
no,
confused
that is
myself on
fine.
that one.
Okay, no, that is
And
fine.
I'm also aware of the fact that there was the 2024 in your exhibits. That was the permit that was issued by the county less than a year ago. And that would be the conversion of the garage to the ADU, is that correct?
That is correct, Hearing Officer Hebert.
At that time, what was your understanding as far as, is this the only garage, the garage that was that was the full garage and part of it was converted, but some of it is still a garage? Is that the only garage for this residence?
Yes, it is.
So what is your understanding when this April 2024 was issued, how the residents were going to access that garage?
Here in Osceola, this is a garage for a recreational vehicle, and the applicant still has storage for the recreational vehicle at this facility. They converted half of it into an ADU.
So you're
And
saying that there is no garage at all for vehicles that are not
I
recreational vehicles?
believe there is a garage on the other side at the other driveway for the main residence, but this was the garage for the motorhome that was, or travel trailer, that I don't know if this owner or the previous owner had built. And Mr. Woods requested to turn half of that structure into an ADU, and we're here for the variance because they want to be able to use that secondary driveway for the ADU.
Well, I understand that, but it's, in looking at Exhibit D, there is a drawing that shows, I guess, what was proposed. And that was dated 2024. Ms. Martinez, I'm putting you right in the middle of all this, but
Yes.
it is part of the materials that were done to do this conversion of the ADU. And it appears that there's a connecting road between the two existing driveways. Does that exist?
Here in Osceola, that portion of the driveway was never built when the original driveway was permitted.
Okay. So at this point, the only way you'd be able to access the recreational vehicle would be with this secondary drive. Is that correct?
That is correct, and the driveway was allowed for the recreational vehicle storage. The problem came is when he went and they did the ADU, the code doesn't allow an ADU to access a second driveway.
I understand that. Is there a traffic concern? Because it sounds as if this is a cul-de-sac, this particular road. Are there a number of houses that would have to go past this entrance area. I'm just trying to get to the, other than the fact that I understand the ADU.
I don't believe there's a traffic concern with it. It's more of just the way the code is written at this point in time.
I understand. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Okay, thank you.
And is the applicant here, Mr. Wood? Would you come forward?
I do. James Wood. I live at 4 Harada Court, the address at hand, Santa Fe 87508. I'll try to make this as brief and concise as possible, and I think I can do that, especially based on the last case. First thing I want to point out for clarification is the only portion of the variance at hand here is being able to park in front of the accessory structure / dwelling. To clarify things on your behalf, there was 2 garages that were detached from the main home. When we bought the property, we bought it with the intent to keep one of the garages and then convert the other half of the accessory dwelling to an ADU, which is what we did. Our son moved here with us, and the intent was to do that. So that's one reason that we specifically bought the property. So the secondary driveway is not at question at all. All we're asking for is to be able to park in front of that. And we received a letter that confirmed that in November of 2024 from the building and development manager for the county. So again, it's only the variance is only specific to parking in front of the accessory dwelling. The reason that's important is because our son lives there now. If he can't park there, he's going to have to either walk through the house, walk through the courtyard, or walk around the end of the cul-de-sac. That's not as much of a concern for us. More of a concern was that he'll probably move on at some point, and we may have an elderly relative, or even if the property was sold, it's more than likely, and that's very common in the El Dorado community, is there's elderly parents that live with their family on the property. And they're likely to be more challenged in mobility. Some may even be handicapped, and that would create an undue hardship for them to have to walk around. I'd like to present 2 exhibits. Should I bring those to you, or?
Yes, that's.
One is I'm going to address right now. The last one is just a letter of support from one of our neighbors. They wanted to attend, but they're limited in mobility, and they felt a letter would be sufficient. So if you look at that's the permit I think that you were looking at earlier.
Yes.
And I asked specifically a number of times about this, and the answer that I got, because I asked why was the secondary driveway permitted in the first place? And if you look at the red marks on that particular permit, that's the one that I got from the county. Even they are questioning the fact that that driveway was put in it in the first place. When I asked that question of them, the answer I got was because there was a terrain constraint. If you look at page 4 of the county's response to this case, please look at the staff response and the last sentence of that staff response. I'll just read it while you're looking for it. There are no terrain constraints. Santa Fe County staff has conducted a site inspection of this property. So technically, based on the code, that secondary driveway should never have been permitted. In conversations with the previous landowner, they told me and my wife that specifically if that had not been permitted, they would have never built the structure. If they had never built the structure, we would have never bought the property. So the county, in my opinion, my wife as well, the county inherited a significant liability in this particular situation. We've tried to put our best foot forward and do everything possible to get this cleared up. In our eyes, it's very simple. All we're asking is to be able to park in front of that. Whether it be my son, future elderly relatives, or whoever that might be that needs to be able to have immediate access to that particular dwelling. The last thing I'd like to point out, and you mentioned it a bit ago, we've already put the 18-inch culvert in place, the 2 posts marking both ends, and the reflectors that are required by the Public Works that reviewed this particular case in the property. So we've done our best to come into compliance, and we respectfully request that this variance go forward and be granted.
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
You bet.
Are there any other comments on this application? I don't think there's anyone here in the room.
Here in Australia Bear, there is nobody online.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, I'll prepare a recommended order within 15 working days. And thank you for your attendance.
One more thing. Do you want the part of the code relative to that particular conflict?
The
10.3.2.2.
For the ADUs,
That's specific
yes.
to an accessory structure.
Yes, I have that. Thank
Okay,
you very
very
much.
good.
Okay, thank you.